Hello, we are going to do the do now and go over it for 5-11. Let me pull up my split screen and get my whiteboard up here and try and do the best I can here. So this is for the do now, and you can make fun of me later. I'm trying to figure out how to write on this board. 5-11, and I'm having to write it with my finger, so that's a lot of fun. So it wants us to find the inverse. So the first equation that you have, let's see if I can move this up here. Well, let's see, the first equation we have is y equals x squared minus 3. Okay, so if you think you know what you're supposed to do here, why don't you take the time to do that and find the inverse? And as I'm trying to go through, I'm going to clear this off and I'm going to rewrite it so I have more room. All right, y equals x squared minus 3. All right, the first thing that we need to do when you're trying to find the inverse is you have to switch the x and the y. Okay, so switch x and y. So it's going to become x equals y squared minus 3. Now, once you get it where the x and y are switched, now you're going to solve for y. All right, so I always draw a dotted line going up and down here, and I'm trying to get y by itself. Well, first I have this minus 3. I have this minus 3 right here. I need to move that to the other side, so you have to do the opposite. So we're going to add 3 to each side, okay, which makes these two things cancel out. And on the left, I'm going to have x plus 3 equals y squared. All right, now the y is over here by itself, but it has a squared on it. So to get rid of the squared, we're going to have to take the square root to both sides. So I'm going to take the square root here and the square root here. The reason why you do that is because the square root and the squared are inverses of each other. They cancel each other out. So now my answer becomes y equals the square root of x plus 3. This is now your answer. This is your inverse. This is your inverse. Okay, so let's try the second one that we had on the do now. It said y equals 2x squared plus 5. Find the inverse. So the first thing, remember our first step was to switch the x and the y, because that's what the inverse is you're talking about the opposite. So we'll switch it around. So I'm going to come over here and put x equals 2y squared plus 5. All right, now you need to solve for y just like we would, solving for x in a regular equation. I put a dotted line here to remember to balance. The first thing you're going to move is what's being added or subtracted. So there's a plus 5 right here. So we're going to subtract 5 from each side. And I get x minus 5 equals 2y squared. Okay, well now the y is still not by itself. It's got a 2 hanging with it. So 2 and the y right next to each other means to multiply. So to get rid of the 2, the opposite or the inverse of multiply is to divide. So I'm going to divide each side by 2. All right, running out of room, I'm going to come over here to write now. So these cancel each other out. They make 1. So I'm going to go ahead and switch it around and put y squared equals x minus 5 over 2. Now, the squared is what's messing us up because the y has to be by itself. So you're going to take the square root to both sides. Again, the square root and a squared are inverses. They cancel each other out. So I get y equals the square root x minus 5 over 2. That's one of the ways you can write it. But here we go. We can find the inverse of this function.